Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to watch a short video about communicating climate change. My name is Jeremy Hoffman. I'm the Chief Scientist at the Science Museum of Virginia, and I also teach at Virginia Commonwealth University. What I'd like to be sharing with you today is about some strategies that I use in order to effectively communicate climate change. And your role as an ambassador in the RVAgreen 2050 plan and program is of utmost importance. And I think by trying out these very few ways that I've found helpful in framing conversations around climate change, that you too could feel a little bit more confident in doing it on your own. So I'm going to share some of the strategies that I use. I'm going to list them out here, and then we'll go through each one of them one by one with several examples from some of the talks that I've given around Richmond and Virginia over the last several years. The first one that I almost always lead off with is telling a story about myself. I really suggest that telling a story about yourself is going to be a critical way to connect with your audience right away and humanize yourself to especially a new group of people that you might not have interacted with before. I also spend a lot of time thinking about how to hyper-localize the data and impacts related to climate change. Many times people report being disengaged with the topic of climate change because it feels both very far away in time, like something that's going to happen a long time from now, and very far away in space, meaning the impacts aren't happening in my backyard, so why care? By hyper-localizing those things, you can really start to talk about have some conversations around actions that can be taken right away. Then I think it's really important to spend a lot of time focusing on actionable solutions, both for things like right now, things that people can walk out of the conversation that they have with you and go do if they really want, and those solutions that are maybe a little bit bigger and grander and something a little bit more like later in time, but still immediate enough that it feels like they can be involved and have a role to play in taking climate action. And then finally, my last tip is to keep learning about new information and projects. Constantly, we hear about new organizations or groups or some sort of campaign that's going to be going on that may or may not be seen directly as climate change action, but could be through your communication strategies. You can introduce people to actions that they can take and projects that they can volunteer for that would end up having some sort of positive climate-related action associated with it. So we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail. The first one is telling a story about yourself. So again, what I said before was to kind of lead with something about yourself that aligns with action on climate change. So like, you have kids and you'd like them to remain, or tell a story about your children, or tell a story about your neighborhood. Or in my case, I tell a story about growing up as a fisherman in northwestern Wisconsin, and show these photos of myself, in some ways embarrassing photos that I'm willing to share, to show that I spent most of my life, and still do to this day, enjoying the natural resources that are afforded to people that live in the Midwest and really around the country. Fishing and kind of an outdoor recreation is a very common thing that a lot of audiences share, but something that allows for a value to be expressed, instead of it just hopping directly into data. Now, to kind of deepen the storyline a little bit, I then add some particular stuff about, like, so here's a little bit of a character arc. Ooh, there's a walleye decline. And so I talk about how my dad used to make breakfast with walleye and eggs. And it doesn't sound very good, but I swear it is. And share this kind of story about changing species dynamics in lakes in northwestern Wisconsin, and it being linked by the Department of Natural Resources there to climate change. And so I show, then I am able to introduce some graphics and some data visualizations that really hone in on that story, and why does climate change matter to me beyond just the fact that it's some planetary issue? What does it matter to you? And by introducing yourself and humanizing yourself, you can have some really interesting conversation starters. And then it's also a good way to pivot into the present and begin to express some linkages between your personal story and the localized environment that you are living in. So this is a map of streams in Virginia that have warmed up by several degrees over the last 50 or so years. Basically, this tip is just to show the people that you're talking to or talking with that you're a human being. I know that might sound really simple, but it's really true. Connections around our shared experience are much more powerful than any graph or time series or map is ever going to be. Secondly, I like to hyperlocalize the data and the impacts. Again, people tend to feel like climate change is very far away in space and time. So we need to figure out what are the confident scientific linkages that we can make back to our environment here in Richmond. So one of the ways to do this is by taking a look at something that is global, such as the warming stripes, this is a very famous now visualization of Earth's planetary temperatures from 1850 on the far left to the right in the present, color coding each year from by its deviation from the long-term climate average. This is a very compelling graphic, but it does nothing to show any of the impacts that might be more impactful, for lack of a better word, for the people that are you're potentially talking to. And so what we can start doing is localizing those kind of global examples to the scale of something like Virginia or Richmond. So this is the warming stripes graphic for the state of Virginia. And then you can add in a little bit of an additional information, like how 9 out of the 10 warmest years on record here have occurred since 1990. That just gives that kind of global issue local relevance. Now, some of the other things that are really powerful have to do with the connection between climate and health. One of the big time framing techniques that many people resonate with is health, and not only their health, but their kids and their family's health. And so by looking at long-term climate trends, such as things like the last freeze, which this year in 2020, the last freeze of the wintertime occurred on March 8th. It was a new record. We can then open the door to, well, why does climate matter to our health? Through something like the last freeze, that relates back to stuff like pollen. So the changing and earlier arrival to spring has actually resulted in a dramatic move earlier into the year when our peak tree pollen date occurs. Now, this is information that certainly I think you'll learn how to wield in your own conversations. But if you want a localized story about how climate and health interact, the fact that our allergy seasons are getting stronger and arrive earlier has a huge impact on our allergies. And then if you were able to then pull that out and say, well, Richmond's been in the top 10 sneeziest and wheeziest cities for the last decade. In 2020, we are the sneeziest and wheeziest city in the country. And then people are able to start associating that seasonal discomfort that they experience, or that one of their family members experiences, to the impacts of climate change, which have been confidently linked. So again, hyper-localizing the story and impacts of climate change can have a huge impact on the audience that you're speaking with. Other messages that work along these lines as well are talking about disproportionately impacted people and from vulnerable populations. What we've seen, by far in the COVID-19 crisis is, of course, that these pre-existing vulnerabilities can predispose entire populations of people and to suffer worse impacts because of that disease. But those sorts of conversations around vulnerable populations can be very good way to connect with people over that shared value and a localized impact. Water quality is another thing. We're very much fortunate to have the James River right next to us, and and the Chesapeake Bay just down the road. So appealing to that, the health of the Chesapeake Bay is something that's very commonly referred to as a reason to inspire people to act for change. Sea level change on the coast, depending on who you're talking to, might have a little bit of an impact. And then certainly across the board in Virginia, the benefits of clean renewable energy being able to be, a leading conversation, or at least that kind of localized benefit and impact of climate change through its economic opportunity, as well as its ability to make us more resilient to things like disruptions due to things like hurricanes or heat waves. It is a really great way to begin talking about how action has a benefit for all of us. And so those are some typical ways that you can take that climate change story, localize it, and talk about an impact that's tangible to everyone. Then I do think that it's really important to focus on actionable solutions both now and later. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of my favorite programs in the entire city is the RVA H2O program. And what they've done is really focus over the last several decades on improving the vulnerability of our combined sewer system to combined sewer overflow events. And basically on the left here is the dry weather condition where all of the sewage is able to be taken to the wastewater treatment plant. On the right, when we experience a very violent downpour, as we have been more often recently, in part due to climate change, that can actually overwhelm the stormwater system and send a combined stormwater and sewage directly into the James River. So this is a project that's totally ongoing and has been going on for many years, and RVH2O has some significant improvements that they've made over the years. And this actually resonates too with that idea of hyperlocalization. So the solutions that we have are really big in scale and small, like a backyard solution. So one of the things that RVH2O does a very good job of doing is to describe what is going on with green infrastructure projects around the city of Richmond. Pictures of an amenity, a park amenity like the low line or along the Capitol Trail is one of the examples that can be used as like, here's what we're doing, here's the action that we're actually seeing that adds resilience of our aging stormwater system to the effects of climate change. And then what's amazing is that, okay, so that's maybe not a project that they can necessarily take home and do right away, some major infrastructural change. But what they can do is something more simple, like put a rain barrel on their house. If we had enough people with rain barrels, potentially we could all be promoting that same kind of resilience for our stormwater system at our own homes. And so there are programs that we can point to through the Richmond city government, like the Build a Rain Barrel program, as well as the stormwater fee benefits that people get by doing these practices. They actually get to get some money back from their investment in their stormwater fees. So that's an example of some sort of solution that is both like close by in place and close by in time, and it's something that they can see going on in a longer time period, as well as something that they can do right away. So again, these can be more broadly than this. They can be definitely opportunities that do even more things like tree plantings and things like that. It gets more complicated when it has to do with energy, but in any case, focusing on solutions and the sorts of things that people can do makes them feel very empowered about being able to do something about this local, once you've gone to the local impact, that they can actually have a local solution as well. Finally, keep learning about new information and projects. So this is something that requires a little bit of investment of your time beyond your initial conversations with people, is to follow up and keep incorporating new information and exciting new projects in your communications. What we've seen over in the last few weeks in response to the coronavirus crisis here in Richmond, and I'm recording this on in late April. And so some of the things that I've seen that are really great to incorporate into messaging around climate action right now are things that really do reflect on people's ability to take action in time of crisis. And so, this article from Mallory No Pain appeared talking about Duran Chavis and the Ginter Urban Gardeners building resilience gardens and providing free raised bed gardens to people that want them. This is an example of building resilience through the food system. And so it's just a way to inspire people with a localized story and incorporate new breaking information into your communications. Also, we've seen huge impacts on our park systems. One of the main ways that we can establish some really amazing climate resilient public spaces in the future is through parks creation, and people are enjoying parks right now in a major way. So keeping up on new sorts of public green spaces and opportunities for them to get involved in that is a great way to keep your message fresh. Then also what I love is to incorporate something that'll get a little bit of a laugh out of people. You need to have fun in this kind of a conversation as well. It can't be all doom and gloom. So I love sharing things like this photo of a flock of sheep visiting in an empty McDonald's. And this is just stuff that's come out of the news in the last few weeks. And being sure to keep your eyes out for those stories or new science that's appearing, to be able to talk about those findings and achievements and progress are going to be really important to keeping your message consistent and fresh and exciting for you and your audience. So I think that is again one of the more important aspects of this, is that keeping it interesting not only to your audience but yourself. You are going to be a messenger around this, so it's important to be incorporating things that reflect on your own story, your own voice, and your own vision for what climate action looks like. So at this point, I want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this short video about some of the techniques that I use in my messaging to connect with different audiences all over the state of Virginia and even all over the country, that has found ways to connect with people. And I think I've enjoyed it, being able to communicate about climate change in many different aspects and to many different groups. And I hope that you'll find this useful as you develop your own messaging around your personal story. Make yourself human, hyper-localizing the impacts and why that's important to you, taking a look at some solutions that people can implement right now, as well as kind of larger scale things that might be a little bit farther out in space and time, but nonetheless shine back on real tangible solutions that people can get involved with. And then keeping your message updated and incorporating new things as you learn about them is all really important stuff. So thank you so much. Good luck out there, and take care.